Excuse me.
Okay, I suggest we start now. We've got nearly 50 people. We'll no doubt have a few more joining us after we start, but I don't want to lose more time. Welcome, everybody. I'm Duncan Bowie. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Socialist History Society, and we're really pleased to have Ariel Hessayon as our speaker. This is our annual A.L. Morton lecture, which we revived after a couple of years of lapsing. A.L. Morton, as many of you know, was a leading member of the Communist Party history group and a leading writer on the English Civil War period, and probably his best known book, The World of the Ranters, published in 1970. So it's very timely that our speaker today is speaking on the Ranters as one of the leading current academics writing on the Ranters and related religious radicals. Ariel is a lecturer at Goldsmiths College. He's written a number widely on religious radicalism, not just in England at the time of the English Civil War, but internationally, having written on Jacob Boehme and various other Christian radical mystics of that period. So he's got a presentation which is now visible. His internet is a bit wobbly, which is why we've switched off. He switched off his camera, but we'll see him later when we get to questions. The talk's going to take about 45 minutes, but there will be lots of time for comments and questions afterwards. But please switch off your, basically mute your mics. Most of you are muted already while Ariel is speaking, and I will call on you to speak when we get to the question session. If you can then use the reactions button to put your hand up, or if you're on camera, then wave at me and I'll try and catch you if you can't work out how to use the reactions button. So over to our speaker. Welcome.
Thank you very much indeed, Duncan, for that generous introduction, and to you and to all of you at the Socialist History Society for the kind invitation to deliver the A.L. Morton Memorial Lecture. It's a great honour for me, and I've used it as an opportunity to, as my title indicates, revisit Morton's famous World of the Ranters. I should add that the paper that I've written is not the paper that I thought I was going to write. So I hope that there's still plenty to discuss. We'll see how it goes. Arthur Leslie Morton's The World of the Ranters, Religious Radicalism in the English Revolution, appeared in hardcover shortly before Christmas 1970. This 224-page book was advertised in Marxism Today as a study of left-wing preachers, prophets, movements, and sects, as unacceptable to the parliamentary men of property as to their royalist enemies. Retailing at £2.75, it was published by Lawrence and Wishart. This firm, which had been established in 1935 by Ernest Wishart on taking over the business of Martin Lawrence, was originally based at Red Lion Square, London, and served as the press of the Communist Party of Great Britain. A paperback of The World of the Ranters, also published by Lawrence and Wishart, followed in 1979. I've given the titles of both of those editions there. Leslie Morton, 1903 to 1987, was born on the 4th of July, 1903, as some biographers have noted American Independence Day, at Stanchill's Farm, Hengrave, near Bury St Edmunds in Suffolk. The eldest child of a conservative voting tenant farmer, he was educated privately by a series of governesses, then at King Edward VI Grammar School in Bury St Edmunds, Eastbourne College, Sussex, and Peterhouse, Cambridge, where he studied history and English. At Cambridge, Morton joined the University Labour Club, where he was part of a circle that included several young men who became distinguished in their fields. The economist Maurice Dobb, the Irish scientist J.D. Bernal, the filmmaker Ivan Montagu, and the journalist Alan Hutt, all became lifelong communists. After leaving Cambridge, Morton was employed as a school teacher, firstly at Steyning Grammar School, Sussex, during which time he supported the general strike of 1926, and then for a year at Summerhill in Leiston, Suffolk. The latter, established by the Scottish educator Alexander Sutherland Neale, was an experimental progressive school promoting democratic community. In December 1928, Morton married his first wife, Bronwyn Jones, fellow teacher and daughter of a schoolmaster. They soon moved to London, where Morton joined the Islington branch of the Communist Party. He also kept a second-hand bookshop in Finsbury Park. Having read The Wasteland closely, which evoked in Morton a horrific portrait of the modern world after the Great War, beset on one side by desolation and squalor, and on the other by anarchy and instability, he became acquainted with its author, T.S. Eliot. Thereafter, contributed regularly to the Criterion, a literary magazine edited by Eliot. Morton, moreover, wrote for a quarterly periodical called Scrutiny that had been founded in 1932 by the literary critic F.R. Leavis. Indeed, Morton has been called an accidental historian who would have preferred being a poet, at least when younger, and was accordingly praised for the quality of his textual analysis. In 1934, Morton became the legal proprietor of the Communist Party, which had legal liabilities. The newspaper was called The Daily Worker, renamed, as many of you will know, The Morning Star in 1966. In addition, Morton worked as a reporter, sub-editor, and feature writer. One of his assignments was covering the Norfolk contingent of the 1934 Hunger March, the social protest movement highlighting unemployment and poverty. That same year, Morton separated from his wife Bronwyn, who took their son Nicholas with her. Morton then settled in Kentish Town with Vivian Jackson, a teacher, whom he eventually married in December 1945. Vivian was a younger daughter of the communist orator and writer, shown here, Tommy Jackson. Regarded as the most prolific of the Marxist worker historians, Jackson edited a militantly atheist journal called The Fight against superstition, clericalism, and cultural reaction, to which Morton contributed. Having left the Daily Worker in 1937, Morton embarked, if not on a pilgrimage, then a long, solitary winter walking tour of several weeks' duration. He followed the Icknield Way, an ancient trackway stretching from Norfolk to Wiltshire, and also visited the grandest, if not best known of stone circles, Avebury. Doubtless Morton knew he was following in the footsteps, if not quite literally, of Daniel Defoe, William Cobbett, and, at Avebury, William Morris. Indeed, Morton's connection with the English landscape and his evocation of certain places became a noteworthy feature of his historical writing. Hence, Bury St Edmunds would feature prominently one chapter of The World of the Ranters. Long in the making, but written relatively quickly, Morton's first book, A People's History of England, was originally published in May 1938 by the socialist Victor Gollancz and distributed through the Left Book Club, anti-fascist organisation with a membership at its peak of 57,000. Partly modelled on J.R. Green's short history of the English people, which had been published in 1874, and completed against the backdrop of the Spanish Civil War and what Morton called the menace of fascism. This influential exercise in Marxist theory and exemplar of history from below was praised by Christopher Hill as the best history of England for the ordinary reader. Indeed, its trailblazing nature has been recognised by non-Marxist historians too. Reprinted after the Second World War by Lawrence and Wishart, it was revised in 1948 following exciting and stimulating discussions at an informal meeting of the historians group of the Communist Party, of which more shortly. It has since been frequently reprinted in hardback and then paperback, as well as being translated into more than a dozen languages. More than an estimated 100,000 copies have been sold to date in the United Kingdom. Following a return to Leiston, Suffolk, undistinguished military career during the war, rising to the rank of Lance Bombardier in the Royal Artillery, and the publication of a dozen essays entitled Language of Men, which as you can see was dedicated to his father-in-law, Morton became a founding member of the historians group of the Communist Party. Formally established in 1946, this collective counted among its members Donna Torr, who had translated an anthology of letters of Marx and Engels from German into English, Rodney Hilton, who had published on serfdom and the English peasantry in the Middle Ages, Victor Kiernan, Eric Hobsbawm, and Christopher Hill, who regarded the group's very stimulating discussions as the greatest single influence on his later work. Their objective was to create a progressive rationalist tradition of Marxist history in Britain and to criticize non-Marxist history and its reactionary implications, I'm quoting here, where possible contrasting it with older, politically more radical interpretations. Marked for its moral exhortation and uplift, their passionately debated agenda had an urgent tone because, as Hill remarked, history plays an important part in the battle of ideas today. According to Hobsbawm's coy recollection, members generally did not feel any sense of constraint of certain matters being off limits, nor did they feel that the party tried to interfere with or distort their work, even though to criticize Marxism was to criticize the party, and vice versa. Moreover, aspects of modern history were politically sensitive, and none of the group's period sections were devoted to the 20th century. The historians group flourished until 1956, when, in the aftermath of the Soviet Union's suppression of the Hungarian Revolution, not to mention internal debates about democratization, a number of leading lights, including E.P. Thompson, Hill, and Hilton, left the Communist Party. Morton, however, remained, along with Hobsbawm and others, and served as the historians group chairman for over 30 years. In 1950, Morton, together with his wife, Vivian, moved into a late 12th century chapel that had been converted into a cottage at Clare, Suffolk, shown here. Although always short of money, he'd been able to purchase the property with a small legacy. Regarded as the oldest inhabited house in Suffolk, it was not only cold, but initially lacked modern amenities such as a refrigerator and telephone. Instead, the walls were piled high with books. In short, to quote Morton's friend, the Marxist philosopher Maurice Cornforth, it was an ideal workplace for a historian. All the while, Morton remained a member of the East Anglia of the Communist Party, even attacking the presence of American military bases as, quote, plague centers that spread corruption and moral degradation among the young. Indeed, it is noteworthy that in winter 1954, less than 2 years after Joseph Stalin's death, Morton and some other members of the historians group of the Communist Party, namely Hill, Hobsbawm, and the Byzantinist Robert Browning, traveled to Moscow by train at the invitation of the Soviet Academy of Sciences. While there is insufficient time to explore all of Morton's writings in the 2 decades preceding the world of the Ranters, I want to look briefly at a handful that appeared in the 1950s, since they offer earlier treatments of certain ideas, movements, and individuals that would feature in this book. First, an essay on Lawrence Clarkson, an itinerant Baptist preacher turned self-styled captain of the Rant and author of a vivid and extraordinarily frank autobiography called The Lost Sheep Found, shown on the left, which Morton regarded as of greater intrinsic interest than John Bunyan's Grace Abounding. Entitled The Lost Sheep Astray in the County of Suffolk, this article appeared within the third part of the proceedings of the Suffolk Institute of Archaeology in 1954. Morton was therefore the first Marxist historian to publish anything substantial on the Ranters, and he may have developed an interest in them through reading the work of the American Quaker historian Rufus Jones, notably a chapter on the Seekers and the Ranters in Jones's Studies in Mystical Religion. Moreover, Morton may have been attracted to Clarkson's Lost Sheep Found, a copy of which was then held in the British Museum, because of its account of Clarkson's activities in Suffolk, especially since Clarkson was examined and then imprisoned at Bury St. Edmunds, an important centre of sectarian activities, quote Morton. Bury St. Edmunds featured again in Morton's piece on John Lancaster, one of the founders of an independent church in the town. His work is shown on the right. This too was published in the Proceedings of the Suffolk Institute of Archaeology in 1958. Slightly revised versions of the essays on Clarkson and Lancaster are subsequently included as chapters 2 and 5 of The World of the Ranters, so I shall return to them shortly. A further study requiring discussion as a prelude to The World of the Ranters was Morton's long essay on William Blake's sources, The Everlasting Gospel, published by Lawrence and Wishart in 1958. Here, Morton presented Blake as a highly skilled craftsman, born into the world of London dissenting radicalism, an angry manual worker living in a filthy, disease-ridden city, nursing bitter, class-fueled hatred, whose writings were full of explosive comments about kings, Tories, priests, and the oppression of the poor by the rich. Against the backdrop of industrialization, dark satanic mills disfiguring England's green and pleasant land, and the French Revolution, Morton's Blake railed against the ideological foundations of capitalist exploitation at the dawn of an age of mass production. A central theme in Morton's essay was taken from what he regarded as Blake's last important poem, The Everlasting Gospel, of about 1818. Derived from Revelation 14:6, Morton had explored this idea, so essential in his view to any understanding of the advanced sex, in his essay on Clarkson. There, Morton had suggested that the doctrine's origins went back to the eschatological scheme of the 12th century Calabrian-born abbot Joachim of Fiore. Although Morton had referenced G.G. Coulton's chapter on the Everlasting Gospel in Coulton's Studies in Medieval Thought of 1940, he did not cite a discussion of the eternal gospel in Jones's Studies in Mystical Religion, a work which we know he's familiar with through other citations. At any rate, the Joachite conception of 3 ages of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, and its subsequent adoption and adaptation drew Morton into a world of familists, antinomians, seekers, ranters, and Muggletonians. Although he had acknowledged that it was not easy to fill the gap stretching from 12th century southern Italy to the sectaries of mid-17th century England, Morton nonetheless posited the existence of a common tradition in which Blake also had a share. Having noted the availability of writings in English translation by several so-called spiritual reformers, and here I'm sure he was following Jones, notably Sebastian Frank, not to mention erroneously stating that the German Lutheran mystic Jakob Böhmer was clearly much influenced by Joachite ideas. He was not. Morton turned closer to home. Specifically, he suggested that the antinomian the antinomian sects shared a common body of ideas, common language, and, crucially, that their beliefs persisted most strongly among the artisans and petty tradesmen living cheek by jowl in the working class quarters of Blake's London. Maintaining that Blake was the greatest English antinomian, if also the last, Morton's search for Blake's forerunners brought him to the most uncompromising form of English antinomianism, the undeservedly neglected Ranters. Having noted their extravagant, shocking behaviour, the unrestrained hostility of contemporary polemicists, not to mention the literary qualities of their work, which was marked by a fervour and a wild poetry that he found both moving and effective, Morton was forced to conclude that however admirable their intentions, the Ranters were entirely ineffective politically. This was because they had dissipated their energy on crazy extravagances, thereby exposing themselves to state-sponsored suppression while simultaneously alienating potential sympathisers. All the same, there was one figure who, despite following the logic of his antinomianism into grotesque excess, had a close affinity with Blake, even if Blake was a wiser and a saner man. This was that strange genius, Ebenezer Copp. He was the author of, among other works, A Fiery Flying Roll, which Morton saw as a despairing appeal to London's slum population, not least to its criminal fringe of beggars, whores, and pickpockets. Morton's reading of Copp's Fiery Flying Roll, with its symbolic and sometimes fanciful treatment of heaven and hell, bizarre expressions of a genuine fervour, and almost sulphurous atmosphere of spiritual war, constantly reminded him of Blake's prophetic books and the marriage of heaven and hell. Indeed, so numerous and so striking were the resemblances in Morton's mind between Blake and Copp that he wondered if Blake had seen a rare copy of the roll, or at least if Blake knew people who had secretly preserved Ranter teachings. It was a groundbreaking suggestion, one later taken up by E.P. Thompson in Witness Against the Beast, who in 1993 would argue that the closer we are to 1650, the closer we seem to be to Blake. Although I think that neither Morton or Thompson were able to convincingly demonstrate that Blake was influenced by the Ranters, the question of who, if anyone, was reading them, or at least possessed their works in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, is an important one. I've explored this briefly elsewhere, so instead want to bring us back to the world of the Ranters. As Austin Woolrich pointed out in his review, the title is somewhat misleading, since the world of the Ranters is not a monograph, but rather a collection of 7 essays. 4 of these had been previously published, including, as we have seen, those on Clarkson and Lancaster. And of the 3 new pieces, only one, albeit the longest, was on the Ranters specifically. Besides Clarkson and Lancaster, there were chapters on 2 other individuals, the preacher John Saltmarsh and the leveller leader William Wallen. These 4 people shared a common antagonist, Thomas Edwards, Presbyterian controversialist, true hammer of the heretics, and author of a 3-part publication called Gangrena. These, to quote Morton, huge shapeless compilations of sectarian errors, heresies, blasphemies, and pernicious practices, were the subject of an excellent study by Anne Hughes some 20 years ago. Morton considered Edwards the most outspoken and persistent Presbyterian opponent of the sects and of religious toleration. His Gangrena an exceedingly valuable mirror of the time. Indeed, a document of first-rate historical value, though one that had to be read with special care, since Edwards invariably puts the worst construction on the actions of his opponents, and is frequently careless and inaccurate about details. Also noteworthy in this connection was Morton's praise for Wallen's attack on Edwards, shown here, an antidote against Edwards's Old and New Poison, which contained, quote, a brilliant and still topical analysis of the technique of the witch hunt. But that topicality makes me wonder if Morton had in mind a modern witch hunt when discussing Edwards, namely McCarthyism. Turning to Lancaster, Saltmarsh, Clark and Wallin, Morton's approach was largely to let them speak for themselves. So much so that one quotation from Clarkson's Lost Sheep Found extends to nearly 6 pages, and another from Lancaster's rejoinder to Edwards, entitled Lancaster's Lance, is almost 3 pages. It's had the merit of providing non-specialist readers with a taste of some mid-17th century pamphlet controversies, at a time when, with the exception of many leveller tracts, few of these works were available in modern reprints. Even so, it must be said that such extensive quotations seems excessive. Indeed, there is little by way of direct argument, and often minimal engagement with relevant secondary literature. Instead, the readers provided with observations and judgments. Thus, Morton deemed Saltmarsh a saintly character and strong streak of pacifism. In a sense, the most unworldly and apolitical preacher, yet also a symbolic figure in deep sympathy with the levellers, who yearned, like Wallin, for a new order of love, freedom, and justice. By contrast, Clarkson was imbued with hard-headed common sense, although there was always an element of bombast and self-glorification about him, even when he was most sincere. In the same vein, Lodwick Muggleton, who along with his cousin John Reeve claimed to be one of the 2 witnesses of the Spirit foretold in Revelation 11, was a man of great courage and unbreakable determination, a true hero, though perhaps not a very attractive one. As for the leveller leaders, John Lilburne and Richard Overton, the former had a passion for martyrdom, the latter a warm pugnacity. Of all the characters in the world of the Ranters, however, Morton was seemingly most in sympathy with one of the most thoroughgoing revolutionaries in an age of revolution, William Wallin. Clearly, Morton's 6th chapter, A Still and Soft Voice, its title taken from the pamphlet on the left, was not intended as a self-portrait. Indeed, there are evident dissimilarities. Wallin reportedly had almost 20 children. Nonetheless, there are several striking parallels. Thus, the Marxist historian Raphael Samuel described Morton as tall, stooping and gentle, temperamentally averse to infighting. Similarly, Morton's Wallin was a quiet, reasonable, contemplative man who did not enjoy conflict. Instead, he sought and secured attention by lowering his voice, so that only the most careful and attentive listener could catch it. Furthermore, Morton's Wallin had a house and garden, together with a varied and well-read library. He was charitable, politically active, and with a large circle of friends, whom he liked to entertain and with whom he would discuss freely. And he had long experience in managing committees and drafting petitions. Morton's Wallin was also anti-clerical, a skeptical mystic, not to mention an exponent of secular humanism, of reason and nature, who became progressively secularized as his advocacy of religious toleration developed into promoting a program of political democracy. What is more, influenced by the Epistle of James, Wallin fiercely denounced the rich, looking on aghast at the sight of thousands of miserable, distressed, starved, imprisoned Christians. Perhaps the passage I've just quoted from Wallin's The Power of Love of 1643 evoked in Morton memories of the Great Depression, and in particular the 1934 Hunger March, which he'd covered for the Daily Worker. But whether or not that link can be established, Morton was clear that the leveller attitude to the Irish question still had some practical importance in his own day. After examining the accusation, which was not denied, that Wallin espoused the cause of the Irish natives in seeking their just freedoms, immunities, and liberties, it was surely with the troubles in Northern Ireland in mind that Morton considered it of the greatest significance that the first English Democrats were also the first to oppose on principle a war of colonial conquest. Level of Democracy, Fact or Myth is the seventh and final chapter of The World of the Ranters. Reprinted from a pamphlet issued in 1968 by the History Group of the Communist Party, it takes issue with the arguments of C.B. Macpherson and Christopher Hill concerning the extent to which the Levellers desired to expand the franchise. Morton had discussed the Levellers in his People's History of England and returned to them a decade later in a pamphlet called The Story of the English Revolution, which had a foreword by Harry Pollitt, then General Secretary of the Communist Party of Great Britain. There, Morton made an argument for political continuity, and I've given the quote. The Levellers first introduced a new conception into politics. The conception of democracy is the continuous activity of the whole people. In doing so, they made themselves the first of a glorious succession that has continued unbroken right down to our own time. The masses who fought against popery and wooden shoes at the close of the 17th century, the worksite radicals, the English and Scottish Jacobins, the reformers of the age of Cobbett, the Chartists, the early socialists, and the communists today all draw their inspiration from their predecessors and ultimately from the Levellers. Nor did Morton confine himself to arguing for continuity in the political sphere only. For in a later essay on the Leveller style, he maintained that they wrote effectively not merely because they were exceptionally gifted or technically well equipped, but because they wrote with a purpose clearly understood and deeply felt, and for an audience which they knew to be close and immediately responsive. These badly printed pamphlets strike home today, as they did 300 years ago, because they are warm, generous, and candid, because their authors knew exactly what they wanted to say and went to their work without hesitation or doubt any pretension to the grand style. They stand near the head of one of the great streams of English prose, the stream which later was to include such mighty figures as Bunyan, Defoe, Paine, Cobbett, and Shaw. They can fairly claim to be the fathers of the tradition of plain English writing, dedicated to the service of the plain man. Here, as with his suggestion that Blake shared in a common tradition, Morton was engaged in what was largely a cooperative venture aimed at recovering and popularising what can be termed the canonical English radical tradition. A single continuous narrative spanning from the Peasants' Revolt of 1381 to the Chartists and the modern working class movement. For Raphael Samuel, this was essentially an attempt to domesticate British communism and discover its native roots, even a form of cultural nationalism that drew upon older traditions of religious and political dissent. Morton's strong sense of the Englishness of our landscape and of our culture was something that Hill remarked upon too, and it is a topic meriting fuller discussion, especially in light of Morton's other publications, such as a jointly written history of the British Labour movement published in 1956, which included a chapter on Chartism, and a later pamphlet commemorating the 600th anniversary of the Peasants' Revolt. But I must press on by turning finally to what Morton had to say about the Ranters. To do so, I will locate his discussion within an account of what has been written on the subject prior to the World of the Ranters, as well as what has been published since. It is well known that the Ranters got a hostile press from just about everyone, both in their own day and for more than 3 centuries thereafter. Hence, Abbey as a cop, whom we saw earlier, and whom some contemporaries regarded as a sectarian preacher turned diabolically possessed mad libertine, was portrayed by the Oxford antiquary Anthony Wood as a lascivious blasphemer, ultimately and justly debilitated by alcoholism and sexually transmitted disease. So blackened was Copp's name that in the late 18th century, he was still remembered as one of the wildest enthusiasts of a fanatical age. 19th century critics fundamentally concurred with this verdict, calling Copp a strange enthusiast and the great ranter. In the same vein, Alexander Gordon, the Unitarian minister and authority on Protestant nonconformity, dismissed Copp as an insane, if somewhat pathetic, fanatical proponent of distorted antinomianism, given to flights of mystical fancy that were occasionally expressed in passages of almost poetical beauty. Early 20th century commentators were little different. Copp was an indefatigable dipper who became one of the wildest ranters with an appetite for excessive drinking, smoking, and swearing. While his most significant work, the vigorous and colourful Fiery Flying Roll, was reckoned an eccentric book full of curious ravings and stylistic idiosyncrasies. Just as Copp was vilified in particular, so the ranters at large long remained maligned. Partly this was because they neither sought nor succeeded in establishing an enduring legacy. Their leading lights imprisoned, their most inflammatory writings suppressed and publicly burned, their influence dissipated. The ranters initially had no advocates to refashion their past and rehabilitate their reputation. Unlike Baptists, Quakers, and even Muggletonians, who carefully collated and copied manuscript letters, testimonies, and treatises, as well as meticulously compiling records of their fellow believers' sufferings, almost no one attempted to legitimate the ranters by preserving their records for posterity. Moreover, late 19th and early 20th century denominationally committed historians, largely preoccupied as they were with constructing complicated, if unbroken genealogies of religious descent, were repeatedly at pains to distinguish the ranters' blasphemous opinions and seemingly scandalous activities from those of their much eulogized founding fathers, mothers, and precursors during the English Revolution and beforehand. Consequently, Quaker scholars, even allowing for polemical exaggeration and distortion, frequently denounced the ranters as a dangerous pantheistic aberration and disorganized degenerate movement whose extreme mystical doctrines and immoral excesses had threatened to spread like a contagion across the nation had it not been for the spiritual antidote afforded by George Fox's ministry in Quakerism. This alone had cured many wayward souls infected by a serious outbreak of mental and moral disorder. Nor did the ranters fare better within the two broad prevailing historiographical trends of the period that were largely responsible for the piecemeal rediscovery or recovery of what is now usually called English radicalism. One was bourgeois, liberal, and teleological, essentially concerned with identifying democratic and republican ideas that emerged in response to acute social and economic tensions during the English Revolution, together with tracing their growing influence during the American and French revolutions. The other was socialist and Marxist, with an emphasis on secular class struggle under the shadow of capitalism. Neither, however, effectively integrated the ranters within their conceptions of radicalism. Indeed, the ranters at first received scant attention from Marxists, excluding Morton, and their fellow travellers, mainly because they found it awkward incorporating their supposed practical antinomianism and pantheistic doctrines within orthodox scientific interpretations of the English Revolution. Arrogantly and snobbishly lumped with self-appointed messiahs on the lunatic fringe by Christopher Hill, it was other scholars who originally stressed the ranters' humble origins, bold class hatreds, and powerful demands for social justice, including the common ownership of all goods. The most notable, besides Morton, was Norman Cohn, whose The Pursuit of the Millennium of 1957 provided an incipient contribution to the psychoanalysis of prophetic and messianic figures, as well as a welcome reprint of key passages from selected ranter texts. Presented as the celebrated leader of the drinking, smoking ranters and a future adept of the free spirit, here Copp's most significant work, the vigorous and colourful Fiery Flying Roll, was characterised as the product of a literary eccentric, since it was full of curious ravings and stylistic idiosyncrasies. Envisaging the ranters as mystical anarchists prone to extravagant behaviour, Cohn eventually located them within a loose tradition spanning from the Brethren of the Free Spirit of the 13th and 14th centuries and the spiritual libertines of the 16th century to Charles Manson and his murderous family of 1969. By the late 1960s, several unpublished dissertations had been written on the Ranters, though most researchers were based in North American universities. One was completed at Oxford by J.F. McGregor under Hill's supervision. McGregor suggested that ranterism was indicative of a climate of opinion expressed in antinomian ideals that could not be translated into social terms because it was a philosophy of individualism. According to McGregor, after 1651, ranterism existed as a largely fictional image in contemporaries' minds, although the ranters also survived indistinctly as a mood of disaffection. Then in 1970, Lawrence and Wishart published Morton's World of the Ranters. As we have seen, Morton had previously speculated that Blake and Copp shared a common body of ideas and expressed those ideas in a common language. Now for Morton, the Ranters formed the extreme left wing of the sects, both theologically and politically, combining a pantheistic mysticism and a crudely plebeian materialism with a deep concern for the poor and a primitive biblical communism. The Ranter movement spectacularly manifested itself in late 1949, peaked the next year, and then splintered under the hammer of savage repression. Its sudden emergence at a moment when the radical plebeian element had been politically defeated signalled all the signs for Morton of a revolution in retreat from the forces of bourgeois respectability. In contrast to the rural diggers, the Ranters were primarily an urban movement, appealing to the defeated and declassed, drawing support from London's impoverished artisans and labourers, including those on the margins of criminality, as well as wage earners and small producers in numerous towns. All the while, Hill became increasingly sympathetic to the Ranters, recognising that they too perhaps had something to say to our generation. Consequently, they underwent a remarkable transformation in The World Turned Upside Down, published in 1972. Thus, together with the diggers and other daring thinkers, the Ranters were lauded by Hill for boldly defying early modern European bourgeois society's greatest achievement, the Protestant ethic. Accordingly, just as antinomianism was reconfigured as Calvinism's lower-class alter ego, so Ranter swearing was seen as an act of defiance against God and the imposition of Puritan middle-class standards. Furthermore, Hill likened the Ranters' tobacco smoking and communal love feasts to drug-taking and free love, overstating, as he later admitted, their participation in a Puritan sexual revolution. Under the heading A Counterculture, he claimed that the Ranter ethic, as preached by Copp, leader of the drinking, smoking, swearing Ranters, and Clarkson, involved the real subversion of existing society and its values. Only the experience of defeat put a check to the intoxicating excitement. But what had looked in the Ranter heyday as though it might become a counterculture became a corner of the bourgeois culture. That this was a post-1960s manifesto, thinly disguised as history from below, was, I contend, precisely the point. Over a decade passed before an uncompromising reaction to Morton's and Hill's interpretations was published. This was J.C. Davis's Fear, Myth and History, issued in 1986, and provocatively chosen by Kenneth Baker, then Margaret Thatcher's Education Secretary, as his favourite book that year. Davis argued that abusive terms like ranter were witness to some sort of social struggle, rather than functioning as precise cognitive signifiers or markers. Furthermore, he detected a tension between the word ranter, as revelatory of the perception of 17th century commentators, and the thing ranter, as perceived by 20th century historians. Assuming that he was dealing with a heterogeneous collection of individuals rather than a homogeneous group, Davis proceeded to test the proposition that ranterism was either a reasonably consistent set of doctrines maintained, however fleetingly, by a handful of people, or the broader movement that contemporaries ordinarily reported. To help identify a small core of ranter ideologists linked by common theological doctrines and a shared social program, he proposed two essential components of ranter thought: antinomianism and pantheism. He then set about eliminating the ranter fringe, new messiahs, new prophets, and new victims, before tightening the cord to dispense with several alleged ranters: the millenarian and visionary George Foster, the former army chaplain Joseph Salmon, and the preacher Richard Coppin. There followed an examination of the ranter corps, which consisted for Davis of the Leicester shoemaker Jacob Bottomley, Abiezer Copp, the anonymous author of A Justification of the Mad Crew, published in 1650, and the preacher, polemicist, and secretary Lawrence Clarkson. For Davis, the evidence suggested that the ranters did not exist, either as a small group of like-minded individuals, as a sect, or as a large-scale, middle-scale, or small movement. Consequently, he was forced to justify why, if there were no ranters, so many contemporaries who might have known better believed the contrary. Accordingly, Davis ascribed literary conventions to the sensational literature: short, racy, disapproving, and at the same time prurient. He maintained that ranterism was a powerful and dangerous slur, which had to be directed away from the Commonwealth towards its enemies. Amidst the reckless fabrication and repetitive exploitation of material, he noted two themes: influence of atheism and the relationship between ranterism and royalism. Moreover, sectarian exploitation of the term by Baptists, Quakers, and Muggletonians kept this image of deviance alive. For Davis, there was thus no ranter movement, no ranter sect, no ranter theology. The fierce but inconclusive debate that immediately followed generated a great deal more light, its most enduring legacy being destructive rather than constructive. Concerns, given the problematic nature of the evidence, that it may prove impossible to establish the ranter's existence to everyone's satisfaction. Even so, it is sometimes forgotten that Davis, like Morton and indeed Hill, depended entirely upon printed documents. Davis was apparently unaware of evidence contradicting his conclusions, made factual errors, dismissed inconvenient sources, overlooked Baptist influences in Copp's writing, rarely grasped theological subtleties, and severely underestimated the extent of his subject's social networks, while his attempt to explain away a self-designated ranter corps provoked, to say the least, a great deal of justifiable criticism. That criticism, I should add, came from Christopher Hill, amongst others, but not from Morton, who, according to Hill, did not consider it worth the trouble to refute Davis. Back to the Wallin-Morton analogies. Nonetheless, in the furore generated by his book, it has generally been ignored by Davis's critics that parts of his argument are persuasive, and that some of what he said, in my opinion, is correct. Davis was right to warn against taking Clarkson's autobiography, The Lost Sheep Found, or polemics by Baptists, Quakers, and Muggletonians at face value. Likewise, several pamphlet and newsbook accounts of ranters were either completely fictional or mainly invented. And when I told Colin Davis this in a tea room of the university library one time, he said, "You can't believe how happy that makes me." But more of that in the question. The majority, however, mention names that can be corroborated from court records and seem to accurately reflect charges brought against the accused. The term ranter, to my mind, should therefore be used cautiously to indicate hostile yet shifting contemporary attitudes towards individuals who normally knew each other, usually through conventicles, Baptist congregations, or as members of spiritual communities, believe themselves to have been liberated from or passed beyond the outward observance of gospel ordinances, maintain that all living things sprang from God, and that God was in all living things, espouse similar theological notions that were regarded as blasphemous, especially that sin was imaginary, and that to the pure all things are pure, justify transgressive sexual behavior, drunkenness and cursing through scriptural precedents and interpretations, demanded that Christians fulfill their charitable obligations by giving to the poor, sick and hungry, and enacted shocking gestures as prophetic warnings of the impending day of judgment. While none of this was exclusive to the ranters, and while there was no ranter archetype that conformed precisely to all aspects of this characterization, collectively it embodies the central features of their perceived ideas, outward conduct, and self-fashioned identities. With the publication by Anne Lawrence of 2 Ranter poems, Nigel Smith's important and recently reprinted collection of, well, relatively recently reprinted collection of Ranter writings, and Andrew Hobson's edition of Cobb's selected writings, literary experts, Nigel and Nick McDowell among them, have gradually shown one way out of the impasse reached in the Ranter debate by focusing on typography, genre, imagery, mimicry, parody, vocabulary, and modes of address. Archival-based biographical studies of the major personalities, with an emphasis on mapping social networks, offer another exit. Elsewhere, I've done some preliminary work on identifying the Ranters, exploring their origins, examining how they were seen by contemporaries, accounting for their activities, discussing their beliefs, assessing their possible sources, reviewing the ways in which their texts were expressed and suppressed, and their afterlife. Since this is available both as scholarly articles on academia.edu and freely accessible blog posts, notably my Substack, I do not want to repeat myself here, but you're welcome to go and look. There's insufficient time anyway, I expect. Instead, I'd like to conclude by inviting us to have a discussion about Leslie Morton, his life and legacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ariel. That was fantastic, actually, both as an overview of Leslie Morton's life and work, but also over the various debates and the historiography of the Ranters. So I hope, I'm sure many people, some who know some of this and some who may know less, found that as interesting as I did. So questions, please, or comments. It's probably best if you put your hand up under reactions and I can see your hand on the screen. If not, just wave at me, but you'll need your camera on so I can see you. So who wants to go first? Right, James Crossley.
Oh, thank you very much, Ariel. I really enjoyed that a lot. A couple of points. I think you're right to read Morton's reading of Walwyn in light of how he viewed the ideal communist. There's another angle to this, I think, that's important. It's written in 1970, but also edits the earlier 1950s essays to really heighten the antinomism. And I think it's like Hill, like Hobsbawm as well, it's also in dialogue with 1968 and the apparent revival of anarchism and things like this. It's an uprising, a student uprising, social uprising they can't ignore. They have some sympathy with, but it's too libertarian, too anarchic, and so on. So I think that the world of the Ranters and his editing of it is also a reaction to that. The reaction to Morton's alleged reaction to Davies's work, according to Hill, I think has to be taken with a pinch of salt, perhaps, because Morton was dying, really. He was very ill at the time, and he did respond to it all the time, no matter how obscure, whether it was a book review or whatever. He was always looking for a right to reply, and this seems to me that he didn't think it was worthy to respond. Seems really out of character from what he did in the rest of his career. So I wonder if that was as much him coming to the end of his life than Hill's. I'm not saying Hill's lying or anything, but I mean Hill's reporting of that, I'm a bit wary of.
You want to respond to that?
Well, hi James. Thank you very much for those points. I think they're excellent points, and I take them fully on board. And in particular, I could only rely on. I never knew Leslie Morton. I could only rely on what Hill had to say about Morton's response, and I take your word for it. You've just, I mean, for those who don't know, James has just written a book on Morton that's coming out next year.
January, even sooner. I can't wait. What I can add is a little bit of secondhand knowledge about that debate, which is that somebody who should remain nameless told me that he was self-designated peacemaker between Davies and Hill, and that what he attempted to do was bring them together over a shared love of cricket. But I'm not sure how successful that was. Christopher Hill was definitely a Yorkshireman, and I'm not sure if Colin was a Yorkshireman or Lancastrian.
Well, we can check, but definitely a sort of either the same rows. Nigel's going to tell me.
Okay, Nigel Smith next.
No, I don't have a response to that. But first of all, Ariel, thanks for your excellent lecture. I learned a lot from it. Just following on from James Crossley's comment, one of the starting points for me with the Ranters was being taught by somebody at the University of Hull in the English department in the late 1970s, who considered himself a kind of latter-day antinomian. He was the son of a Methodist prison reformer and had been totally switched on by Morton and then Christopher Hill, which reappeared in his lectures. So I think there's some work to be done, and I can pass on names. That person, John Hoyles, died at the end of 2021, nearly 3 years ago now. But I think there's a network of left-wing intellectuals going back to Cambridge and to Kingswood School and hence E.P. Thompson and so forth that will, well, maybe it's already been explored, but I think it's a field that is rewarding to pursue.
Do you want to comment, Ariel, or should we take another question?
Just to say hi, Nigel, and to thank you for those answers. And certainly I'd like to. I mean, I was going to do something with this paper, and then James was not only working on Morton, but actually already finished a book on Morton. I'm not quite sure if there's anything left to say, but if James thinks there is something still left to say, then I'll certainly follow up. If he says he's done it all, then I'll stop. Thanks, Nigel.
All right, I think the two of you need to have a conversation, clearly. But we may also want a discussion about publishing what you've just done for us today, but we'll come back to that separately. Steve Cushion.
Yeah, this is not entirely fair what I'm going to say, and I don't expect a response, but I was really struck by the comparisons with the world that you're talking about and what I've been reading about Robert Wedderburn and the followers of Thomas Spence 150 years later. And I've just read something where they described the followers of the Spenceans as a radical underworld, a ragtag group of downtrodden artisans, partisan revolutionaries, petty criminals, sex workers, heretical preachers, proletarian printers and poets, former Caribbean slaves, runaway sailors, dispossessed Irish and East Indian immigrants, and others on the margins. And and the way equally people have dismissed Thomas Spence and Robert Wedderburn as if they were kind of madmen. The allegations of sexual I mean, Robert Wedderburn was fitted up for running a disorderly house when in fact he was, you know, and so all of that sort of thing. So I just sort of saw that parallel. You know, as I say, it's probably not fair for me to ask you to comment on that, but it really, really struck me from what you were saying. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. I'll respond a little bit because I think it is relevant to what I was saying in many ways. And there are two approaches to this. One is precisely the approach that I think Leslie Morton took, which is to look for the continuities, to look for that extended tradition, the Peasants' Revolt to Chartism, through the English Revolution and through late 18th, early 19th century in English reactions to the French Revolution. Essentially, I'm wondering how much the writing of or the writing about radical English Revolution influenced writing about late 18th, early 19th century, whether people are reading each other and seeing similarities in the right. And the third, of course, is whether they are drawing upon the same source material or whether it is just reworkings of the Bible in different contexts. I mean, we certainly see a resurgence of, for example, apocalyptic speculation in the late 18th century, of Judaizing. One only has to think of Richard. So there are differences, but there are similarities. The question which Morton posed, which I think fascinating, are there continuities? And I feel it's a great point to raise. Thank you.
Right, I'm looking to see if there's anybody else. But while I'm waiting, can I just ask a question, which is, I mean, can you comment more on the sort of influences of Jacob Boehm and the whole kind of mystical apocalyptic tradition? Because I know you've written about that separately.
Sure. Well, I could give you an entire paper on that, but I know that's not the one you signed up for. So I'll restrict myself specifically to Burns or lack thereof on the Ranters and to an extent the Quakers and the Diggers. So with regards to the Ranters, my current position is that there is only one who was familiar with Burma's works, and that was Ariel as a Cop. And the elements of Burma's influence in Cop's preface to Copland's divine teachings, but also, as I've now found out, in the Five Flying Roll itself. And all of that is coming out relatively shortly when I get it finished. It's long been argued that there was an influence on the digger Gerard Winstanley, but I can't see any evidence for that at all. Christopher Hill and Leslie Morton argued for a strong influence of Burma on the Muggletonians, and it's certainly the case that Morton mentions Burma and talks about what he considers to be ideas, but he doesn't show any knowledge of Burma in doing so. So I think it's more that he knew of Burma and Burma's ideas secondhand. Who's greatest amongst the so-called sects or radicals is amongst the Quakers, and I think it's far more extensive than is usually appreciated, but it's largely confined, once the early Quaker period is over, to those on the margins of Quakerism, Continentals, the mix and the like. There's a whole range of other influences, but those are the main ones in relation to my talk.
Thanks very much. I knew it was a rather cheeky question, but I thought it was worth drawing attention to your other research, which is relevant. Thanks. Francis.
Thank you, Duncan.
Yeah, it's a question always interests me, is sort of the economics of radical publishing and that sort of thing, for reasons SHS colleagues understand. What do you know about the print runs of these various pamphlets that were being issued by all sides in the 1640s, 1650s? Was this something which was actually a mass phenomenon in society? Were people widely familiar, or at least the literate public widely familiar with this stuff? Or was this really just a handful of people running off just a few copies here and there that happened to have got preserved in libraries and that sort of thing, as a kind of chance or accidental survival? You know, how important were these actual works at the time, rather than the kind of the image that was subsequently created about them, as you said, for political reasons?
Thank you, Francis. That's a really good question. So I'll answer that in two different ways. Evidence for print run is of two types: contemporary, modern day survival of the work, and the second is usually in court records where printers get into dispute with each other and to construct, or through their contracts, what was happening. And we have distinguished in different formats of publication, and also impacts upon print run as well as survivability. So we know that, for example, paper is a quire, which is very long, and they fold it up into different sizes. So the folio, which is very large, usually hardback or bound by gentry noble owner. We have very good survivability, sometimes 40 editions. But pamphlet literature, by its very nature, which is octavo primarily, some multiple folds, 8 pages, one sheet folded all the time, because it's ephemeral, doesn't survive. Of that type of literature, in terms of answering your question, the evidence we have is contracts and court proceedings. And what we know is that the most popular are, as one might expect, astrological predictions, which have 15,000. We also know, contrary to the Hill, is that it's expensive. It's not cheap. It's supposed to be an age of freedom is cheap, but it's not. And people who print in this period, unless they're wealthy, can only do so if they've got backing, whether that be in the form of a patron, or in the case of some of the people I've discussed, possibly a religious community or a church as a collective enterprise. The Quakers, for example, would collect money to create a fund to be able to publish their works against their enemies. Print runs for these type of works, probably 250, so topping 1,000. And it's also, I mean, some adjacent pieces of the case that sometimes it was actually just more convenient to print something than to keep it in manuscript. If you were going to court and were involved in a controversy with somebody and you wanted to influence the jurors or perhaps members of parliament about your case, rather than having a scribe make 12 or a dozen copies, it was almost as cheap, relatively so, to get copies printed up and then circulate them. So it's on the work, but it is an important question. I know we more, but that's pretty much the state of knowledge of where we are. But, you know, random pamphlets in particular, we don't know exactly how many copies of the Flying Roll there were. We know exactly how many currently survive, but it was burned publicly. How many did Giles Calvert publish? It was probably Giles Calvert. As I say, maybe 250 to 500, I think, is a reasonable amount. Out of 5.2, 5.3 million at this time in England and Wales, population of London, 350 to 375,000. An idea of how many people within the city might actually be accessing such a work as well. But of course, they could borrow it, they could copy it, they could hear it read. So there's a secondary dissemination going on as well as ownership. Thank you. It's a great question.
Thank you. Inga Bestrom, you're next.
Hello there. Ariel, I've just got a fact check here because I tend to write notes and I've got one thing that sticks out as probably a mistake. So I just want to check with you. I'm not an academic. I'm an artist that does protest and picket line pictures and things like that. But when you were talking about William Walwyn, you were talking about the Ranters. Was I right in writing down they were anti-colonialists? If it was true, it's very interesting and I'd like to hear more. If I got it completely wrong, please tell me and I'll cross it out now, Ariel.
Thank you. So thanks for the opportunity to clarify that. So the anti-colonialists were levelers that I was referring to. So Walwyn was a leveler, and Morton was essentially praising the levelers for being anti-colonialists and for opposing Cromwell's invasion of Ireland, writing at a moment probably with the troubles in Northern Ireland in the background of what he called the Irish question.
Thank you very much.
Okay, who wants to go next? Right, I know there's a number of experts on the call, so don't be shy. Right, Andrew Foster. You need to unmute.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that, Ariel. I'm very interested in the career of Christopher Hill, and I'm struck by, perhaps you and James maybe can tell me more about the relationship between Christopher Hill and Morton, because as you described, there was a kind of parting of the ways in 1956 and the networks were broken a bit. And I'm struck by a sort of range of ways in which you almost described Hill coming back into that territory, but later, but always with great admiration. In the world we have lost, well, turned upside down. I mean, there's very much commentary all the time on Morton's great work. But how do you see their relationship? Because obviously they carry, how close were they in the later years?
I mean, thank you, Andrew. I mean, it's a really good question, and I'm glad that James is in the room. He's probably better equipped to answer that. I can only go off what it says about Morton in his works, and writes a tribute to Morton which is reprinted in edition of Morton's writings that were published posthumously in 19 by Margot Heinemann and Willie Thompson. Because it's a tribute, one was never sure whether that's the real Hill view of Morton or whether that's Hill's presentation, as James was pointing out, of Morton for a particular audience. But I think it's fair to say that, I mean, James can correct me if I'm wrong, regardless of whatever intellectual disagreements they may have had, and Morton challenges Hill in the final chapter of The World of the Ranters on his reading of the Leveler ideas on the franchise, that there is that great admiration for and from Hill to Morton. And part of it may be, I'm just generational. Morton is of a slightly older generation than Hill. He's pushing earlier than Hill in substantive forms. And I don't know if there was a mentor relationship or not, but I'm guessing that regardless of the path that Hill eventually took, that presumably there's something that remained there. But you can guess that I'm rather vague, and I'm hoping that James can come in with more details. But I think it's worth. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
James, you want to comment?
I can. That's broadly correct. They were very, very close from the proto-Communist Party historians group. They were very close within it. Hill was one of the key people who involved in the heavy revision, or heavy-ish feedback, I should say, to People's History of England. And after 1956, they remained very good friends, as Morton did with Thompson and others. I mean, Morton had some gentle criticisms, and there were criticisms both ways, but they were very, very close and corresponded with one another and things like that. They worked together. And Morton's last pamphlet on 1688, which was more or less completed when he died, was revised by Hill and Willie Thompson. So Hill was brought in, and Hill spoke at his funeral and things like that. So they remained very, very close and worked together. So I think Ariel's absolutely right. And the discussion they had was amicable about the extension of the franchise and things like this. They disagreed, but not in any hostile way.
Yeah, thanks. That's very helpful. Anybody else? Sorry, Nigel Smith, you want to come in?
Yeah, if nobody else wants to speak, since I've already spoken. So Ariel, where is the coalface of research on the Ranters now, and how does it reflect A.L. Morton's legacy? You passed on to me, Ariel, the discovery in Germany of the divorce pamphlet by Thomas Tillam, the Seventh-day Adventist. That, for instance, seems to me to be strong evidence of sexual alterity in the form ultimately of polygamy, and in the first instance of, as it were, enabling partners to divorce unbelieving spouses in order to marry people in the faith. And that those English Baptists, as you know, existed in a kind of utopian community, which I suspect was polygamous, in two different locations inside the German-speaking world through the 1660s and the 1670s. That is interesting evidence of, a way forward. And I wonder where you yourself are at the moment.
Well, thank you, Nigel. I mean, it's a great thing to raise. Where am I myself? I am enjoying the fact that I can actually be an historian again after 18 months of professionalization, which I won't speak about more, and just hoping for the opportunity to return to the as and when I can. I mean, these days a little bit of TST. If you want to know specifically, yes, I want to write a book on the Ranters. Yes, a lot of it is written. Is it first on the list to do? No, that's a Jakob Burma book that's been sat there for a long time. I'm breaking up. I'm just going to switch my camera off. And I've got some other projects that need wrapping up as well. But I think also, I don't know if they're on the call, but I think David Como has a PhD student who might be working in this area. So there's still interest. And
yes.
I haven't finished saying what I want to say.
Okay.
I was wondering whether you were going to comment on the debate about whether the Baptists were polygamous and polygamy in other sects at the time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, sure, I'm happy to comment on that. I mean, for those who are unaware, the great split amongst the Baptists was the question of the extent of community. Did one believe in community of all things, community of goods and community of women, or only in community of goods? And this is the split, for example, in the Diggers, who obviously have Baptist roots, and Winstanley goes down the pathway of not community of women, whereas the Ranters do have a community of women, something Kopp refers to casuistically in one of his forced retractions. And I think your point about the Tilham community is really important, because obviously that's a different type of continuity. Did Tilham personally know the people that we've been discussing? It's very likely he knew of them.
I would think so.
Given all the social networks, very likely that he knew of them.
They were explicitly for the community of goods. That's for sure.
Yes, and indeed, if I remember, circumcision.
Well, that's the other thing. They started calling themselves the Christian Jews, and fusing their identity with a Judaic identity, which is how they were finally evicted by the Elector of the Palatinate in the second residence they had. That's interesting and important.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, and then we could follow up the links. Obviously, for those who are unaware, Kopp would write his name in Hebrew characters on the title page of one of his works. He had probably some knowledge of Hebrew. There are the Judaizing tendencies of people adjacent to the Ranters, and there is the language itself of using late converted Jew. So again, multiple resonances in which to take this, if not direct continuity, but certainly is indirect continuity. And I noted earlier, I mean, I'm fascinated by the question of where does this stuff all go? And why does it reappear when it does? And, going also to one of Steve's earlier questions. So I think there's definitely a chapter to be written on these ideas in the post-restoration period, of which the Tilhamites would be one thing. And no doubt in your work, you've probably found lots of continental examples of similar things. Perhaps not, I don't know.
No, for sure. Often, I don't have an informed comment right now. That the kind of Mennonite communities I've been looking at in the Dutch Republic, and the Low Countries more generally, are far more, they're far more settled, and therefore socially conservative, and so the fusion of utopian social impulse and millenarian expectation isn't there in quite the same way. Even though of course the theological inheritance is in a sense held in common.
Thanks. David Parker, you wanted to come in. Sorry, you need to unmute. We can't hear you.
Okay. Can you
Yeah.
hear me now? Yeah. I just want to go back very briefly to the Hill-Morton relationship, if I might. They've just spent 10 minutes looking back in my own book on the historians group for the quote, which I couldn't quite remember. But when when Maurice Dobbs' Studies in the Development of Capitalism appeared, Hill actually said that 9/10 of the discussion on Morton can now be scrapped by simply telling him to read it, i.e. to read Dobb and rewrite accordingly. And I never fully worked out what was going on there, but I suspect there was, until Hill later changed his mind, he didn't go very much for Morton's more gentle treatment of the Tudor monarchy, as not being quite as feudal as Hill in his early days thought it was. That's all. It's just an observation.
Thank you, David. For your
Thank you, David.
research.
I'm just actually bringing up a copy of your book now on my screen. So I know the quote. I know the quote is from the minutes of the Communist Party Historians Group, isn't it?
I didn't have time to look at the footnote to remember where I got it from. But do you want to know where it came?
Yeah, I'm sure it's from.
I can
I'm
never
sure it's
remember.
adequately sourced. Yeah.
3. Hill. I seem to have got it out of the Dobb papers.
Okay.
Okay, we'll leave that there for the moment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you find out any more, do tell us. Right. Anybody else? Anybody who wants to contribute who hasn't spoken yet? It's your last chance. Looking for anybody waving or hands up. Okay, I think that's it. Ariel, do you want to say a few concluding words?
Well, just Duncan and everybody else, thank you so much for the opportunity to have delivered this lecture. Once again, it was an honor and a privilege, and I've learned not only a great deal in the writing of it, but particularly in the questions afterwards. I'm very grateful for all the kind and generous and constructive comments. Bearing in mind how heated the Ranters debate and Morton's own gentle nature, I think that a discussion where one can disagree in friendly ways or come across more productive and far more beneficial for the questions. So thank you all.
Right, thank you very much. And given you told us a bit about your next couple of books, we may well invite you back. But there's lots of thumbs up, and I saw Nigel had a cloud of upward thumbs up floating over his face.
Yes, I didn't expect that to happen. I just thought it would be one thumb raised.
I also noticed one person had their camera upside down most of the talk. Given that we're talking about the world upside down, I thought that was quite appropriate in the circumstances.
Symbolic.
Okay. If I can just give a sort of a plug for the Socialist History Society. Some of you are members, many of you are not. So please join us. For joining, you don't just get told about all our talks, which are mainly online now, but also you get our bi-monthly journal, Socialist History, edited by Francis King, who's with us. A couple of occasional publications.
Biannual, not bi-monthly.
No, did I say twice a year? Sorry, did I say bi-monthly? Sorry, twice a year is enough. Sorry, a couple of occasional publications and also our newsletter. So do join. The information is there online. Our next two events: the Museum of the Revolution, a talk by Nikolai Sarkisian on 29th of October, 7 p.m. online. And also there was another one underneath somewhere. Yeah. Tuesday, the 19th of November, 7 p.m. Margaret Wren, will introduce her new study of Paul Foot, A Life in Politics. And we are organising a few other events. We're just trying to organise dates at the moment. So hope to see some of you online at those events. I do point out the Socialist History Society, is for all its members, and do tell us what research you're doing or events you want to plug for our newsletter. We're also looking for short contributions to the newsletter, book reviews or brief articles on matters of interest to socialist historians. So thank you to our speaker and to everybody else for joining us and the well-informed contributions we've had from many of you. Thank you all very much.
Duncan, is this going to appear on the website?
This will appear on the website, yeah.
Right, thank you. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Duncan. Thank you all.